Good morning. This is Emily Henderson, pharmacist with the Kentucky Hospital Association, and I am joined by my colleague, Mary Beth Ecken. Thank you for joining today's Kentucky SOS Emergency Department Bridge webinar. We will begin in about 2 or 3 minutes. Good morning. Thank you for logging on to today's Kentucky SOS Emergency Department Bridge program. We will begin shortly. We have others logging on, so we want them to be able to get on and be on from the beginning. So thank you so much for being part of this webinar today. We will start shortly. Good morning, and welcome to the Kentucky Statewide Opioid Stewardship Emergency Department Bridge Program webinar. I am Emily Henderson, pharmacist with the Kentucky SOS program. I am joined by my colleague and pharmacist, Mary Beth Ecken. Today, we are excited to present to you actually a two-part webinar. And Brook West from Voices of Hope has graciously will be offering education for our peer support specialists and for clinicians in general. If you have not already, please mute your lines. If you have questions during the webinar, by all means, please utilize the chat box. There will be time at the conclusion of the webinar to also unmute and ask Brooke personally if you want to ask questions that way. This webinar is being recorded, and we will provide the recording and the link to the slides by the end of the week or early next week at the very latest. But like all Kentucky SOS webinars, it will be posted on the Kentucky SOS website under events and presentations. So you can always use that for reference or share that with staff and clinicians as well. So today, Mary Beth and I are delighted that Brook West is offering her time and expertise to educate us on a webinar entitled Help the Helper, Self-Care for Peer Support Specialists. Brooke, thank you so much for presenting today, and Kentucky SOS welcomes Brook West.
Thank you so much, Emily and Mary Beth, and good morning to everybody, and good morning to the Bridge program. So glad you all are here today. Yeah, we're going to be talking about self-care, which is such an important topic, especially this time of year. But the chat is working, and please feel free to participate as we go along. I'll be asking some questions during the presentation. Would love to hear from you out there in virtual land, and feel free to ask questions. So Yeah, my name is Brook West. I am a person in recovery and the training and education manager at Voices of Hope, which is a recovery community organization in Lexington, Kentucky. Um, Great. Just saw the chat's working. I love that. Okay. Recovery to me has been about learning how to care for myself and educating myself on what's healthy for me, what's safe for me, and then putting what I've discovered into practice. And I'm really passionate about empowering people in the helping professions, like peer support specialists, to helping to empower them to take better care of themselves, and not just for the quality of your own recovery, but so when you go out there to help others, that they are experiencing the best version of you, the best version of us. Here is our funding statement. This work is supported by the CDC's Overdose to Action Grant through a partnership between Voices of Hope and KIPRIC, the Kentucky Injury Prevention and Research Center. And our learning objectives today are to describe self-care as harm reduction and to create at least one self-care practice for yourself. And like as a bonus, we're going to get into some holiday self-care tips at the end. So take a moment and think about how you care for yourself and consider this cartoon. I love this cartoon series by the Awkward Yeti, where each organ in the body has their own little personality. And here we have heart. They have buried their emotions, and brain says, "See, isn't that better?" Heart says, "Yep." I know this cartoon resonates with me. I know that burying feelings or avoiding my feelings, not caring for myself, that seems to be my natural baseline setting for life. But if that is true for you too, please stick around and let's add some more tools to the self-care toolkit, because man, this is not sustainable. And there's just better ways to care for ourselves than just avoiding our emotions. So before I get any further, what is self-care? This is a definition from the National Institute of Mental Health. Self-care means taking the time to do things that help you live well and improve both your physical health and mental health. This can help you manage stress, lower your risk of illness, and increase your energy. Even small acts of self-care in your daily life can have a big impact. And I think it's important to highlight that the small acts of self-care in your daily life have a big impact. It's not about spending a lot of money on self-care. Having a self-care practice, which we'll talk more about in this presentation, involves those small acts of daily living that help us nurture our physical body, our emotional health, our mental health. And we'll talk more about the different domains of self-care and some of these small acts that you can start incorporating into day-to-day life. So why does self-care matter? Especially in the helping professions. But if you are a peer support specialist, a recovery coach, a care navigator, there's many terms for the work we're describing, which is people with lived experience of recovery from substance use disorder and or mental health concerns, who are helping others who are in and seeking recovery for themselves. But if no one's told you, you have a really hard job. You face mental, emotional, and workplace challenges. It's not just you. And there was actually a study done at the University of Rhode Island. They sent out a statewide evaluation of peer recovery support services, and they wanted to hear from peer workers. They wanted to hear about their workplace challenges and their personal challenges that they experienced as a peer support specialist. And I don't think their responses to this survey will surprise you. But they said that in the workplace, they felt overworked. They felt like there was a lack of sufficient supervision. They had challenges navigating addiction stigma. They had difficulty maintaining boundaries, and that they felt like there was a lack of resources for their clients, such as transportation. And then personally, these peer support specialists reported feeling just emotionally drained, feeling like there are no solutions, just not enough resources, that they were taking problems home. They had difficulty hearing client stories, and they were vulnerable to emotional triggers. and they had feelings of failure to do the job successfully. So these are kind of the challenges that peers described, and self-care is a way to do your part to try to mitigate some of these challenges. It's important for me to share with you a story about a peer support specialist named John. This is a true story, but I have changed his name and a couple of the details just to protect his identity. But this is unfortunately a common story, and not the only time I've been a witness to something like this. But John, like I've seen so many times as I'm training peer support workers, he was a new hire, and he was just so excited and so grateful to have a second chance at employment and, another chance at life. He was very eager to prove himself. And John had an amazing attitude. He was engaged. He was approachable. He was kind to everybody. Just wonderful. After he completed his training, he started working at a syringe services program, and the staff there were just thrilled to have John as part of their team. He was positive, he was reliable, and he was making some meaningful connections with some of the participants at the SSP. But one day, 3 months later, someone noticed John's mugshot on the local jail register. He had experienced a return to use, and it just came as a shock to everyone who knew him because he had been doing so well. Everyone was just stunned by this. And a little bit later, when he was out, I had a chance to talk with him, and I had a good rapport with John. And so I felt like I could really ask him about, what happened. And he said that he started to feel depressed after working at the SSP, after being there for a couple months, and that he started to isolate, and he didn't want to see his friends, and he stopped going to church, and soon he began drinking. And after drinking for just a brief period of time, he then acquired opiates, and it went from there. And John said that he was just waiting for his friends to check on him and notice he was struggling. And when no one checked on him, he felt even more depressed. And so I kind of challenged him on this. I asked him, why didn't he ask for help when he started to feel depressed? He was waiting for his friends to say something, but this all happened within like maybe 3 weeks. Like, it really happened pretty rapidly. And John said that he didn't ask for help because he thought he had to be the strong one, that he thought that his job as a peer support specialist meant that no one was supposed to see him struggle. He was supposed to have all the answers. And my heart just broke for him, because although we do need our friends and our support system and our community as part of a self-care plan, no one can do the work of self-care for us. No one can climb inside our bodies and make us do this work. And so I'm here to encourage you to do this self-care work for yourself, and to ask for help when you need it. And know that being a peer support specialist doesn't mean that you're supposed to be strong all the time. You're still a human being. And this is an ongoing journey of healing and recovery. So self-care requires self-reflection. You have to be able to look at yourself and realize your patterns, recognize what you need for yourself to meet your needs, and know what your needs are. So take a moment and consider, what does it feel like when I am not taking care of myself? And please put your responses, if you feel comfortable, in the chat. What does it feel like when I am not taking care of myself? Frustrated, low energy. Absolutely. Tired and burned out. I feel that. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Man, I also hear irritable a lot, that's related to frustrated. I think, yeah, being irritable is a big one. Anxious, exhausted. And how about this question? What are my warning signs and signals? What are some of those signs? Like, oh, yeah, I need to do something for myself. I need to care for myself. Well, while you all reflect on that, some of the responses I've heard are like excessive sleeping. Oh, my body will tell me through challenging emotions, irritability, taking things personally. Yeah. Excessive sleeping is one that I've heard before. Sleeping in work clothes, just coming home and being so exhausted. Yeah, not even changing clothes, jumping in the bed. Another interesting one I heard in a training was yelling at the dog. Someone said, I don't normally yell at the dog, but I know when I'm yelling at the dog that I need to do something different. Um, Not enjoying things you used to enjoy. That's another one. Sometimes for me, it's not listening to the radio. Although I do enjoy silence, I'm here for, also people who like to drive in silence, but it'll just hit me. Oh my gosh, it's been a month and I have not listened to a song in my car. That's a signal to me that something's not right. Oh yeah, isolation, emotional fatigue, getting in my head too much. Thank you so much for sharing. The overeating, being short-tempered, absolutely. Yeah, short temper for sure. Goes with that frustration, that irritability. And this is related. How do I know when it's time to take action to take when it's time to take action to care for myself? So that could be noticing the things we've already talked about. But I think another one is like turning to problematic behaviors or behaviors that were familiar during active addiction, like wanting to manipulate, wanting to lie. Like I know for me, if I'm feeling really tired and I have a commitment on the weekend and I just feel too tired to go, but I start calculating like, ooh, what lie could I tell to get out of this? I know that that's a bad place for me because I can be honest today and say, I know I said I would come, but I can't make it after all. I can say that, and that's okay. But I know when I catch that in my thoughts, those old destructive behavior patterns of the lying, manipulating, that's another one of my signals when I know it's time to take care of myself. Yeah, early detection is key. Daily inventory, yes, and we're going to get into some self-care practice, some things you could be doing, and I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. So here are some other signs to focus on self-care. Some have been mentioned already, but yeah, consider these as some signs. The difficulty concentrating, the anger and irritability, apathy, hopelessness, ignoring hygiene needs. That's like the going to bed, with the clothes on, bottling up emotions or burying them, like Hart in that opening cartoon. The excessive blaming, being in denial about problems, compulsive behaviors like overspending, overeating, gambling, chronic physical challenges such as gastrointestinal problems and recurrent colds, absenteeism, like missing a lot of work and taking a lot of sick days, difficulty separating work life from personal life, dread, insomnia, excessive blaming, loss of appetite, depression, anxiety, isolation, detachment, loss of motivation. Those are all signs to focus on self-care. Did you hear the print? Can we find whoever's not on mute and mute them, please? Thank you. And when to seek professional help. Although no one can do self-care for us, we don't have to do it alone. So I do encourage you, please seek professional help for mental and physical concerns. If the National Institute of Mental Health states to seek professional help if you're experiencing severe distressing symptoms that have lasted for 2 weeks or more. So yeah, the professional help is so important. It's been so critical in my own experience of recovery. And these are things like difficulty sleeping, changes in appetite or unplanned weight changes, difficulty getting out of bed in the morning because of mood, difficulty concentrating, loss of interest in things you usually find enjoyable, inability to complete usual tasks and activities, and feelings of irritability, frustration, and restlessness. So self-care is so important. We know it's so important, and yet we struggle to make it a priority. And so there are just these barriers to self-care. And feel free to chime into the chat if you have comments, or again, if you have questions. But on one hand, self-care can feel selfish, and I'm here to tell you it is not selfish. I'll say more about that in a moment. But it can elicit those feelings of guilt, like especially when taking time for yourself means you're taking time away from someone else, like such as your family, your kids, your friends. But you caring for yourself is not selfish. It can also be lonely, or it could activate abandonment wounds. And the image that comes up in my mind for me, as far as loneliness and self-care, is when, the Voices of Hope president, Jimmy, he decided to quit smoking. And it used to be that everyone would go outside at the same time on the smoke break or vape, but everyone went outside together. And when he decided to quit smoking, it was him alone in the office while everybody else went outside. And I just think about how lonely it can feel when you're trying to make a choice for yourself, to better yourself, to care for yourself in that way. Or the other one is when someone decides they're going to eat healthier and they start bringing the healthy lunch to work. And I feel like I've seen people become a target when they do that. Oh, wow, you're eating a salad. Oh, wow, you think you're better than us because you're, eating healthier now. Like there's just kind of, I think this loneliness that can come when we're trying to change our habits in a direction that's healthier. Also, fear of judgment. Fear that people are going to think that I'm weak if I ask for help. Fear that the job will be in jeopardy if we don't take time for ourselves. I can't take that time off because they're going to think I'm not a team player, or they're going to think, they're going to fire me. I mean, whatever, those fears that prevent us from caring for ourselves. The negative self-talk and or shame. We can just really be our own worst enemy and tell ourselves things like, just get over it, or it's not that bad. Or one that I hear in recovery and I've heard in my own head is, just shut up and be grateful, which is just really dismissive and just avoidant of like a core concern. And anxiety about the future. I can't, take time off because, what if my kids get sick? What if this or that happens? So I can't do anything to care for myself now because of some future fear. And one I don't have listed here is just time in general. I think that's the one I hear the most is I just don't have time. But we prioritize what we prioritize. But yeah, feeling like there's no time. But we can do these small things like the daily inventory that was mentioned in the chat, but we can do things daily that are free and don't take a lot of time, that do add up and contribute to our overall resilience. And I want to run through these recovery principles and as barriers to self-care, because it's kind of a double-edged sword where there is this like light side, this good side to these recovery principles. And then there's this bad / shadow side to these like guiding principles of recovery. And these aren't just 12-step related. I hear these talk about in other recovery spaces or just principles in general that on the surface are really good. And I mean, and there are great qualities with them, but they have this shadow side. So that principle of service, being of service to others, that selflessness, the strength with it is that, you care about other people and you're putting other people's welfare above your own. But then there's that shadow side that comes with that selflessness, which is not seeking help for your own needs and your own concerns. You're just not prioritizing what it is you need for yourself. And then the recovery principle of responsibility. The light side of this responsibility is that we're really committed to helping others. and whatever that is to help them with their recovery, and supporting people. We're just committed. But then we're vulnerable to this guilt and complicated grief after perceived failure. If we feel responsible for someone else's actions, and they act in a way that is, unsafe or dangerous, or, they don't live up to our expectations, and then we take that personally, that's the shadow side of responsibility. Principle of humility. The great thing about humility is it creates this inherent toughness to just endure hardships without complaining. But then on the shadow side of that, it's just not acknowledging significant problems and silently suffering, not advocating for our own needs. The recovery principle of integrity gives us that sense of choosing right over wrong. We've got that internal moral compass, which is a great thing. And yet, on the other side, this double-edged sword is that we can feel really frustrated when other people are not living up to that same level of integrity. And that could just lead to frustration and the resentful feeling. And lastly, willingness. Being willing, it's great because it keeps you open to possibilities, open to action and change, and motivated to be the best version of yourself. Willingness is wonderful. And yet on the other side of it is that we can really do too much. We can overexert ourselves, and feel really guilty when we don't have the energy. When we have the willingness but not the energy, that can be a complicated feeling. Feeling ashamed when outcomes don't match expectation, frustrated when others are not as eager to change. I'm going to check the chat. Any questions? No. Great. So this presentation, I really want to encourage you to develop a self-care practice for yourself. And this, because we experience life in different spheres. And so I want you to think about these 6 domains of your life. Your physical body, that version, that domain of life, emotional, mental, spiritual, social, and professional domains. And I want you to think about how can you create a self-care practice that supports each of these domains. Because stress and challenges, they come up across multiple domains in multiple different ways. And so how can we support each of these domains? So I'm going to walk through these and some examples of self-care for each of these. So physical self-care, this is the foundation of self-care. And it involves tending to the needs of the physical body in order to support optimal functioning. And these are things like healthy eating, nutrition, exercise, plenty of sleep, good sleep hygiene, maintenance healthcare, making those appointments and that we're supposed to make and going to them, and also just hygiene. So important. And then emotional self-care. And emotional self-care includes, practices that help us address negative emotional experiences, as well as self-care exercises that help us to enhance positive emotional experiences. So one is develop healthy coping skills. And this is another one of those things that requires self-reflection. You got to think, what are my coping skills? And to get there, you got to think about what you do when you are stressed. What do you reach for? What behavior do you turn to when you're coping with something that's difficult? And ask yourself, is this healthy or is it not? Is it safe or is it not? Also, setting limits and maintaining boundaries. And boundaries, you'll see, will come up in a few places here. And this will just be the coming attractions for next month, when I will return in January to discuss boundaries and self-advocacy. So just stick a pin in that. More will be talked about boundaries next time. You also want to make time for yourself. You got to prioritize that time and do intentional activity, which means, doing the things that you enjoy, the healthy things you enjoy, doing them intentionally, talking to a safe person. And that doesn't mean to gossip to the person next to you at work, but who is someone who is safe that you can share your emotions with. And this is the rough one. Use the same tools you offer to your participants. so many of us, we know what to do, right? But it's like we have to be willing and take action to pick up those same tools for ourselves. And then mental self-care, which has a lot of overlap with emotional self-care. And these are things that help you care for your brain and your mental processes. And these are things like developing the self-reflection and self-awareness, which is a practice, and you build it over time. Professional care, like therapy, getting that professional help, taking time off, intentional intentional spring break, screen breaks. Man, I really get sucked into TikTok. Oh, it's bad. And I really have to be intentional about taking a break from the screen. And every time I give this presentation, it's like, oh yeah, that's right. This is an ongoing thing for me. Self-expression, whether that's art or journaling or writing the inventory. But how do you express yourself? Do more of that. Follow your curiosity, daydream, solve puzzles, play games. And only you know where the limits are. If it's playing a very stressful video game 6 hours a night where your heart's pounding, your cortisol's off the charts all night, maybe that's not the mental self-care that is nourishing to you. So you got to think about that, reflect on that, and consider what else you could be doing. Spiritual self-care. This does not have to be religious. It's whatever it means to you spiritually. This could be things like spending time in nature, meditation, and there are so many resources for meditation out there. The Insight Timer app is great. There's YouTube link. I mean, there's just so many free resources, so many different ways to meditate, lengths of time. It's so easy to start. I say it's so easy. It's accessible. If you have a smartphone, or if you want to just practice sitting for 1 minute just in silence. I feel like it's one of the most successful things. Prayer, creating rituals, solitude and or fellowship, volunteering, helping others, and reflecting on meaning and purpose. Social self-care is also considered like relationship self-care. And so that's making time for healthy relationships and going to self-care groups, recovery groups, doing activities with like-minded folks, doing that healthy venting thing and sharing with a safe person, again, not the toxic gossip at work, the person next to you. Recreational activities, honoring boundaries, it's another seed has been planted about the boundaries that we'll be discussing next month. And then professional self-care. So this is your work life. How do you care for yourself at work? How's your time management? How do you prioritize tasks? Do you take those regular workday breaks? Do you plan that vacation? Workplace boundaries. Again, we'll talk more about that next month. And then self-advocacy, which is speaking up for yourself. How do I develop that voice where I can advocate, speak up for my own needs? So here's an example of a self-care practice. This one is mine, and it includes on the left-hand side the 6 domains of self-care we've been talking about, and then activities I can do daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annually to have this practice of self-care support me throughout the year. And the biggest one, I think the game changer for me was taking a break away from my desk. The professional self-care is a thing I started doing daily. Because when I was creating this presentation, I really had to get honest with myself and my habits. When I was looking at this blank grid and I had to think, what am I doing for these domains? I had to get honest with myself that I was not taking a break from my desk. And so I've incorporated taking a walk during the workday, and I'm very grateful to work in an office where it's in a walkable place. But some of these overlap. The big vacation's good for my social self-care and my professional self-care. I've been asked before about paying bills and how is that physical self-care, but paying bills is how I have a place to live, how I have access to water, and all of those things support my physical body. So overall, there's like two ways to think about the self-care practice, and that we've got self-care that distracts us, and the distracting or the distancing self-care means like we're kind of pushing away those difficult feelings. And this could be like binge watching TV or scrolling on social media, or it could be like over exercising or over scheduling ourselves, just being so busy that we don't have to actually feel our feelings, or, we can just keep ignoring something that's uncomfortable, our stress, sadness, anxiety. So there's things we can do to distract. And sometimes I need to distract myself. We need that break to try to just recharge and rest. But we also need self-care that helps us metabolizes our emotions, our feelings, and our stress. And so those are those intentional activities that help us process and understand what we're going through. And that can be the journaling, the mindfulness, the meditation stuff, talking to a therapist. So we really need both, uh, both of these categories in our self-care practice. So I want you to start thinking about self-care as a form of harm reduction. So people working in the helping professions, they meet people who are very vulnerable. You're a peer support specialist, you guys are in the Bridge program, you're meeting people when they're really having a bad day. They're just in a low place, and, they're emotionally, physically unwell, and, most likely, traumatized, and they're looking to us for help. And so if they come to you for help, and this could be their first, interaction with like any kind of recovery support, and let's say that you are irritable, you're burned out, you've got that compassion fatigue, you're emotionally detached, and you're meeting with this participant, this person seeking recovery support services. Do you think, you showing up irritable, etc., like, does that help them or does that harm them? And so I say that to say we're ethically obligated to care for ourselves, because how we care for ourselves affects how we care for others. So people are coming to us for a service, and they deserve the best quality services possible, which means like I'm present. I can actively listen. I'm with them. I'm not bringing in, my personal life, into the conversation. And it's putting us in this position to reduce harm to others. So what happens if we don't prioritize self-care? Let's think back to John from earlier in the discussion, and who was impacted by his lack of self-care. Of course, John was impacted in his personal relationships. The participants at the Syringe Services Program, suddenly their peer support that they were getting to know just vanished. The staff at the SSP, they had their reliable, great employee working with them, and then, again, just gone. And I don't want to put the whole reputation of the employer or the perception of the recovery community on John's shoulders here, but you have to think about how our actions have a ripple effect, how our behaviors impact others. And so, and think about that ethically, like, and how our behavior can impact the reputation of the employer, how people think about the recovery community. Because I know, when I was in my active addiction, like I really thought I was just hurting me, and I wasn't involving anybody else. And that just wasn't the truth. There was this impact that reached far beyond me because of my lack of self-care. Yeah, so just to reiterate what I was saying, like, they're vulnerable, and they deserve the best quality services possible. And so this is why self-care is not selfish. Your actions impact others. So now I want to specifically get into some holiday self-care tips. Even if we aren't talking about recovery, And the holidays can be a really, really challenging time. There are expectations, there's obligations, I mean, memories, trauma. There's just a lot of stress that is imposed on this time of year. And again, feel free to jump in the chat if you've got any questions or thoughts on these. But one self-care tip for during the holiday time specifically is connect to your social support. Intentionally create opportunities to be with others to resist isolation. Connection to others is critical, and sometimes I really have to fight the urge to isolate. And I do understand we all need time to rest and recharge, but it's also very important to show up and to be with safe friends and recovery groups and engage with that sense of belonging, especially during the holidays. Tip number 2 is to structure your days. Maintain your routine. Having your routine can really reduce anxiety and to keep your mind from wandering, especially in unstructured time. And as an added benefit, you have that inherent reward of feeling like you're being productive. And this could be this, like waking up at the same time, just eating breakfast at the same time. It doesn't mean you have to keep going to work on your days off, but how can I create structure if I do have time off around the holidays? I mean, for me, it's like, I'm going to plan to see a movie, or I'm going to do this puzzle tomorrow. But I just don't have empty time during the holidays. And then know yourself and your family. Ask yourself if your family is or is not a source of support for you. Family time around the holidays, again, in or out of recovery, can be just emotionally layered and complex. And so, we have all these expectations and all this stress that just comes with the holiday season. And you got to ask yourself and consider, is your family a source of support or not? Are they safe or not? Consider the history. Consider, will drugs or alcohol be present, and to what level of use? And then you got to take your own temperature. You got to see how you're feeling on the inside. And if you're not in the right frame of mind, if you're feeling vulnerable, choose the option that feels safer to you. Because ultimately, no one can do this self-care work for us. And you are responsible to be the guardian of your own recovery. Tip number 4, plan your escape. When it's time to go, it's time to go. I love driving myself. I love parking out of the way, a block over, so I can leave the holiday party, the family activity, whatever it is. I want to be able to leave when I want to leave. I don't want my car to be boxed in. And if you're not driving, if you don't have a car, or even if you do have a car, I think it's good to let a support person know where you're going and ask if you can call them if you need to. Because I'll give my friend a heads up, oh, I'm going over here. Are you going to be around, for the next hour, just in case, just to have that support person on standby. Number 5 is practice your elevator pitch. So what do you say, if you're offered a drink or something? And how do you practice saying no? So no thanks, I don't drink. There's clever ways to go about this. I've heard, no, I'm allergic. It makes me break out in handcuffs. Heard that one. But no is a complete sentence. And your elevator pitch doesn't have to be funny or clever or tell a story. You don't have to explain yourself. But practice saying no. And the last one here is halt. I think a lot of us have heard this before. Stop and think, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling out of sorts, halt and ask yourself, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? do a little mind body scan. I personally really like Star Trek. Okay. And so I love the Star Trek technology where if they approach another ship, they can do a scan of the ship and suddenly they know how many people are on the other ship, what weapons they have. They have all this information about the other ship. So I think of like doing a body scan on myself. Am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? And it can really help you identify like what I might need to work on because I know I appear very cranky when I'm hungry and tired. Oh, I love this in the chat. Me and my partner agree on I'm ready to go. Word prior to social engagements. Yes. I love that. Yeah, having like that safe word, like, oh, we gotta exit. And how great to have a supportive, friend. I did this at a wedding a couple months ago, and I was with a friend, and they know I'm in recovery, and they're very supportive of my recovery. But I reached my limit, and I turned to her and I said, I need to leave now. And she grabbed her purse, and we were out of there. Having that established beforehand and that understanding beforehand is a great plan. Okay, but here's a bonus tip: know your resources going into the holidays. Findhelpnow.org/KY for Kentucky specifically, amazing resource for mental health treatment, substance use disorder treatment, recovery housing, how to find naloxone. Have your Narcan available. The 988 crisis and suicide lifeline, they're available. And the Never Use Alone overdose prevention line. And there's so many more resources out there, and I know that you guys know them because you're out doing that work, connecting people to resources all the time. But again, be willing to use the same tools and advice and suggestions you give to others. Use those for yourself. And just want to reiterate that this is an inside job. No one can do this inner work for you. Man, it is up to you to do this self-reflection, hold yourself accountable, or get an accountability partner. But these things are your responsibility. And it's so important to ask for help. You got to communicate your needs. I know that I'm guilty of expecting people to be able to read my mind. Just like, John from the beginning, how he was like, well, surely they're going to see I'm struggling and they're going to come help me. Some people don't see it. They don't notice it. We're responsible for our own inner world. And I think it's important to recognize our patterns. Zoom out and think about, what do I struggle with? What are persistent issues I'm seeing? And so this could be things like struggling with depressed mood in the winter. And I mean, I think some of us are already there. I know that the winter is just so difficult on so many. But how can you anticipate these difficult seasons? How can you adjust your self-care practice? I've got one friend who struggles with the being depressed in the winter. And so to her, the winter is puzzle season. She does puzzles in the winter, and it's become like this element of excitement to wintertime is that she gets to do puzzles. She doesn't do them the other months of the year. And I think this one is also a classic. I'm also guilty of this, thinking that a new job or moving to a new city will solve my problems and continuing to experience that same discomfort. And I had to ask myself why, and realizing that adage, I follow me wherever I go. What is it that I'm trying to escape? I'm trying to run away, the geographical cure, or the new job or whatever, the new person in my life. I mean, what is it that I'm avoiding? And being honest with myself about, okay, what am I avoiding? What do I need to face? And how can I care for this? I had a request for advanced self-care training. And I think that there's just this real urge to have a shortcut, to just you know, and man, we want that instant gratification. Like I want to be able to do one thing. I want to binge watch a Netflix show for one weekend, and I just want to feel totally free of my feelings and be different. And there's like just that urge for like emotional pain and stress to go away. And I get that, but there just is no shortcuts. Like it's going to the basics and covering these domains of self-care, and investigating, what you could add or what you could subtract, um, to increase your energy, your health and wellness, and then go out there and help and support others as best you can. Here's a list of references. That concludes this presentation. But I want to share with you this QR code because one, we want your feedback, but two, you will receive a continuing education certificate. If you're a peer support specialist, this is worth 1 hour of one CE hour. And so if you scan this QR code, fill out the survey there, the evaluation, and then at the end, there will be an option to request a certificate. And then you'll have to fill out like your name and email, and then it will be emailed to you. And it looks like Leah, my Kiprick buddy, has put the link in the chat as well. And there's my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me if you've got questions or if you would like to request this training. I'm available, and yeah, happy to help, and always happy to hear from you.
Brooke, this is Mary Beth. I wanted to thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your insights with the group. I know that you gave a lot of practical takeaways, and I think that this is going to be really helpful to our peers and to all of our other providers and clinicians in the bridge programs. So we really appreciate your time and your insights and for being with us today in this session. So as Brooke said, we will have the opportunity for the peer support specialist to obtain continuing education. So please ensure that you have the QR code and that you complete the questions in the survey. And then I also wanted to just take a minute to invite anybody with questions for Brooke, if you would like to type them into the chat box. Brooke said that she can monitor the chat box and answer any questions that you all may have. Or if you would like to, go ahead and reach out to her by email if something comes to you in the coming days. So in saying that, we have a couple of announcements we wanted to share with the bridge programs while we have your all's attention. We wanted to remind you to please enter your data into Kentucky Quality Counts by the end of day tomorrow. That is the data needed for the month of November that is due by the end of day tomorrow. If you have any questions, Emily and I are happy to help in any way we can, so please don't hesitate to email us. Next, we wanted to remind everyone on the call that our peer support specialist office hours will be on Thursday, December 18th at 11 a.m. Eastern. So we hope that our peers can join us on that. The Teams meeting invite has been shared, so that should be on your calendar for December 18th. And then lastly, we're excited to have Brooke return again to continue this conversation. And that webinar will be scheduled for January 13th at 11 a.m. again. That invite has not been shared, but it will be sent out to you all. And Brooke will be discussing boundaries and self-advocacy for peer support specialists. So we're very grateful, Brooke, for you to returning to continue this important conversation. And this webinar today was recorded, and it will be shared on the website, and a link will be sent out as well to the participants for if you would like to view it again, or please share it with any colleagues that were not able to join us today. So I will give it another minute or two to see if there's any questions for Brooke. And again, Brooke, we really appreciate your time and for being, on this and sharing such valuable information for our programs today.
Thank you for having me. It was great to be here, and I look forward to getting into the boundaries discussion, which is so fun, next month.
Well, Brooke, I'm taking a look at the chat box. I'm not seeing anything come in. So people are thanking you for your time and enjoyed this presentation. So if something comes up, it is okay for them to just follow up with you by email on this last page?
Yes, feel free to email me.
Okay, wonderful. And we thank you all for joining us today for this Kentucky SOS ED Bridge webinar. And we are looking forward to continuing our conversation in January. And Brooke, thank you again for giving up your time and spending it today with our Bridge programs. So hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you.